Hi, I'm Becky Coletta, and I am running to be the next state representative for the 6th Plymouth District and the towns of Duxbury, Pembroke, Marshfield, Hanson, and Halifax. I've lived, worked, and raised a family in our district for the last 21 years. I'm running for this position to bring my lived experience to work for all of our communities. I've volunteered over the years with the Hanson Kiwanis Club, with Road to Responsibility, with South Shore Women's Business Network, and I've been elected to town government with the Hanson Select Board, the Pembroke Planning Board twice, and the Pembroke Select Board. I've worked on a lot of different committees, and in my personal life, I've been counsel to a company while we built the world's first private international satellite communications network, and I've worked on a coastal engineering firm that also did a lot of post-disaster recovery relief, which we need a lot now. I am running because I believe that my combination of experience and my commitment to our communities will allow me to go to the State House and bring back the resources and the attention we need to address pressing issues like housing, environmental and coastal concerns, educational concerns, and making sure that we preserve reproductive rights for Massachusetts. I hope that I earn your vote on November 5th and I can begin working with you to make our communities stronger and better. Thank you.
Ballot question 1 is whether the state auditor should audit the legislature. Can you explain the ballot question, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it?
So the ballot question would allow the state auditor to audit the state legislature. I think we all agree that we need more transparency in the state legislature. We need to provide more access to information about hearings, about testimony, about attendance by legislators to things like committee meetings and votes on committee issues. The transparency and the need for transparency is something I would work with my colleagues to try to bring about. I've noticed at the State House that the lack of transparency kind of encourages younger legislators to stay away from the State House more. I'd like to see younger legislators and all legislators more involved in the hearing and committee process to try to move forward the conversation around so many bills that get stuck in committee and so many bills that could use more voices to bring about reasonable solutions and to bring them back more quickly. While I think we need transparency, I think the ballot question is overly broad and it's very unclear as to how it would apply between the state auditor and the state legislator. If the people want the ballot question, I will completely support working with Auditor DeZoglio to make sure that the legislature is audited fairly. But I would prefer that the legislature bring about ways to become more transparent on our own. I mean, for example, right now, the legislature is not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. And I honestly didn't know that until I was a staffer on the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development. And what this means is that testimony submitted to the committee is not always available to the public. It means that a lot of discussion around bills that are in committee is not available to the public. I would like to see that change. I would like to see that we make our committee votes, as I said, available to all. And I'd like to see legislators more involved in the hearing and bill process.
Ballot question 2 is on eliminating the MCAS graduation requirement. Can you explain the ballot question, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it?
Hi, ballot question 2 would eliminate MCAS as a requirement for people to graduate. I'm in favor of ballot question 2 because I don't think it's fair to our students to make their future and their diploma dependent on a single test. I think that high-stakes testing does not work for all of our students. And I don't think it's the indicator of whether someone should earn a high school diploma. In my view, MCAS was always about making schools accountable for the quality of the education. It was about measuring how well we're doing at providing a wide range of educational knowledge to our students. I don't think it works as a graduation requirement. I don't think that someone who suffers from severe anxiety or who has similar special needs should be forbidden from getting a high school diploma because they can't manage to pass the MCAS test. I trust our schools to administer an educational program and make decisions about moving students forward in good faith and making sure that students have what they need as a basic education to graduate from high school and move into the working world, be it in the trades or moving off to college or to some other career choice. I truly hope that we can continue to meet the needs of our students without MCAS as a graduation requirement, and I will vote yes on question 2.
Ballot question 5 is on the minimum wage for tipped workers. Can you explain the ballot question, why it is or isn't needed, and your position on it?
So question 5 is interesting because it sounds great. We're going to make sure that tipped workers are paid a minimum wage. But there's a second half to ballot question 5, and that is that the tips that are given to these servers would be shared and could be shared and pooled, including possibly with management, but definitely with people who are non-wait staff and who do not have any direct service with the customers in the restaurant. My concern is that it actually ends up hurting people who are our servers and our bartenders. Because right now, the law says that if they get the minimum wage and their tips don't bring them up to regular minimum wage, that the restaurant has to make good on that anyway. They have to pay them minimum wage if their tips don't add up to minimum wage. So while it sounds like we're helping them, I think we're actually helping larger companies who want to pool tips and spread that around and reduce their own overhead. And I think it hurts small restaurants and the smaller restaurants that service our communities because it puts more cost on them, and it's going to make it harder for small restaurants to stay in business. I don't think it helps the wait staff or the bartenders. Most of the ones I've talked to have said they really don't want to have pooled tips, and they've said that they feel comfortable with that the current system gives them a guarantee of a minimum wage, and they don't think ballot 5 helps them. And for those reasons, I'm going to vote against ballot question number 5.
What do you see as the economic drivers in your district, and how will you support them in your role?
So down here, the economic drivers in our district are small and medium-sized businesses and the blue economy. I look at something like Island Creek Oysters, which when I first saw it on an economic development tour that our former representative, Josh Cutler, put together to bring State House leaders down to see our local businesses, it was a very small business. It was probably around 2013. It has grown so much and built so much more in the way of its restaurant, and its overall business has exploded. And I'd like to see us support those kind of efforts, which rely on our coastal communities and build on our coastal communities without having huge negative impacts to our towns. I look at businesses like Tiny & Sons. They do so much work to support their local communities, to be involved in the local chambers, and to make sure that it's a mutually dependent relationship between our communities and our businesses. I've also spent a lot of time in the South Shore Women's Business Network, and I was on the board of directors there for years. And I've seen a lot of small businesses try to grow, and some of them successfully, and some of them, people have had to let go of the dream. I think we can do more to help to seed small businesses and to help to support them in their efforts to grow by providing quality workforce. And this brings me to my next issue, which is housing. When you look at housing, we're losing a lot of our young people and a lot of our young workforce as people look elsewhere to find housing that they can afford, and some of them are moving out of state. I'm hoping that we can address some of our housing needs locally so that people who have local businesses can find qualified local workers to work in those businesses. I also want to make sure that any growth we have down here doesn't affect the quality of our water supply or our environment. So, with the Old Colony Planning Council, in the last year, we were able to put together an economic development grant, a grant from the state, with the help of Senator Mike Brady, and help from the South Shore Chamber of Commerce. And with those resources, we were able to put together $1 million to hire CDM Smith to come in and work with environmental stakeholders, local town stakeholders, and the business community to look at our water supply and our watershed that is shared among so many communities, and try to come up with an analysis of how growth and how any future use is going to impact our watersheds and our water supply. That type of planning is important, and that's something we can help with as a government, and that's where I would like to see us put our resources and help to grow the small, medium-sized businesses in a safe, environmentally friendly way in our district. I also want to make sure we look at other programs like in Marshfield, where they did the Atlantic Resiliency Project. I'm getting that name wrong, but it's a project to work with the school system and and the Marshfield Chamber and this new Coastal Institute to try to help people get trained on how to do some of the environmental work and some of the coastal resiliency work, and actually bring jobs at the same time that we're protecting our coastline and making ourselves as towns more resilient. And making sure, the other thing we've done at Old Colony Planning Council is to start to work on looking at where we have our businesses throughout the South Shore and how we can help to support those businesses and grow those businesses where there's room for growth. So there's a lot that can be done, there's a lot that's being done, and there's a lot that I would continue to do. I hope I get your vote as state rep so I can do that work.
What will be your top 3 goals and priorities in your elected role? Which committees would you wish to serve on?
When I think about our legislative priorities, it's hard to narrow it down to 3. There are so many issues that impact our district and the residents of our district. Start with the coastline and environmental issues, which are present every day, whether it's on the coast, or on our rivers, on our ponds, our open space. These issues are key to our district and would be key to me. I also look at housing. We need to find ways to make sure that our middle class and our workers have places to live in our district, and that older people have a place to retire or downsize in our district. We need to meet people and provide some choices at all stages of life without negatively impacting the character of our communities. Look at education, K-12. How do we make sure that we are providing a quality education for all of our young people? And doing it in a way that doesn't overly impact property taxes in our district. I go back to the foundation budget, and I look at special education funding, and I think we need to do a better job as a state at taking some of the pressure off of our local communities in these areas. I also think we have to really focus on mental health, and both for our young people, our veterans, our seniors. There's a lot of issues out there where we don't have enough resources, and maybe sometimes we don't have the right resources. So we need to get a little more creative in our thinking and a little better in our funding around mental health issues. Then I look at our seniors and how they're getting to the point where the baby boomers are getting older, and we have a lot of need in our communities to help people to age gracefully and to live the best life they can after all they've done to build our communities. Same for our veterans. I'm very happy that the state has passed the HEROES Act, and now we have to make sure that we implement this act to provide all the resources that our veterans need and deserve. In terms of committees, I look at it as how do I go to the State House and make myself useful? And part of making myself useful is about building collaboration with other members of the legislature so that I can use those collaborations to help to benefit our district. They're the kind of relationships that I've tried to build over the last 21 years and the relationships that I started to build last year as a staffer at the State House. I'm in a unique position having served as a staffer on the Labor and Workforce Development Committee, and I would welcome an appointment to that committee because as staffer and counsel to that committee, I learned a lot about the legislation that is still pending before that committee that is likely to come up again in the next session. I also would be happy to serve on the Education Committee, where we can look at issues like our foundation budget and our special education funding. Also, I would be very happy to serve on the Healthcare and Disabilities Committee. There, I think we need to look a lot at mental health, but we also need to look at our healthcare systems. How do we, we've shut down a lot of maternal services in our area over the last 10 years. We've had the crisis with Steward Healthcare. We need to find ways to support South Shore Hospital, Beth Israel Deaconess in Plymouth, Brockton Hospital, and make sure that we have strong services on the South Shore. And I'd like to see us have more reproductive health care available on the South Shore. So those are some of the committees that I have at the top of the list. But I, like I said, believe that the way to become successful in representing our district is to build collaborations by helping on the committees where the legislature needs me, needs my experience, needs my background.
How important is the art of compromise when it comes to representing all the citizens in your district and meeting legislative objectives?
The art of compromise is incredibly important. Compromise is not a bad word. I feel like these days it's treated like a bad word. Compromise is about finding common ground. It's about finding common ground with people who appear to have differing positions. It's about making sure that in this state, we may have a Democratic Party that seems to be in charge right now in the legislature, but that's a wide group of interest, from rural interest to city interest to coastal interest. I want to make sure that we find common ground that allows us to work together for the betterment of our state and allows me to advocate most effectively for our towns. Over time, I've always tried to work with anybody who is willing to work together towards common goals, even if we have differing opinions. Sometimes we won't agree on every issue, but that doesn't mean we have to stop agreeing on any issue. We need to find ways to get to yes more than we get to no. We need to find positive ways to work together. My favorite experience over the last 21 years was actually when we started the Whitman-Hanson Cable Access Corp. Because at the time, Hanson was very nervous about Whitman. And yet we found a group of people willing to work together from very different backgrounds, very different political stripes. It didn't seem to matter that back then. And we found a way to achieve a solution that was in the best interest of Hanson. And it was to provide a cable studio with Whitman so that we had the resources to have something that was higher quality than Hanson could achieve on its own. And we got to a unanimous decision as to our path forward. And that's the type of collaboration and working together and working through problems to find actual solutions that are better for our communities that I would like to do. I think compromise is incredibly important when it comes to working across the aisle and in working with different interest groups who seem to have widely divergent issues. But I look back to when I first started as a young lawyer, and the judge I worked for gave me Getting to Yes, an old book on negotiation. And it's about how you look beyond positioning and you try to find common ground in order to get to yes and find the best solution all around. That's the kind of work I want to do as a legislator. That's the kind of work I want to do as a person. It's not always easy. I'm not perfect. Nobody out there is. But I can tell you my heart is in the game to make sure that we try to reach compromise where it's effective for our communities. I hope you'll have your vote on November 5th, or before then if you vote early. I hope I have your vote because I have a tremendous amount of lived experience that I want to bring to work for our district. I want to help to bridge any gap between our local communities and state government. I want to help us reach balance, right? Balance between varying interest, commercial interest, individual interest, state interest, environmental interest. Achieve the balance that's going to allow us to move forward in the most productive ways to preserve the fabric of our communities and make them stronger over time, not weaker. I want to earn your vote to work on things like reproductive rights, housing, economic development, and environmental issues. There's a lot we can do. I left the State House in January to run this campaign. I've been working hard over the last 9 months to meet as many people as possible, to door knock as much as possible, to be everywhere in our communities. And as I hear the stories, I hear the need for people to be heard and to be helped. And I hope to do both of those things next state rep. Thank you.